Yo, what's up everybody? So today we are talking with Shouix, the genius Jackie player himself. Yeah, you want to introduce yourself, man?
Hi, so I'm Shouix. I've probably been playing this game for a really long time. I'm one of the oldest players in the community. Probably the only player that's older than me at this point is Skaz. I've been playing Jackie ever since I started, and I basically never stopped playing Jackie. I developed a lot of the builds in the early stages of the game, and I've been taking a short break, but I'm back now.
So why did you decide to start playing Jackie? Is it just because you got into the game and this is like one of the only characters in the game that just really suit you? Or what happened there?
Okay, so when I first started playing this game, it was in 5th Alpha, and you can see the character list here. The character list actually only went up to Heart, so there was only 8 characters to pick, and I actually started playing Immortal Soul Black Survival before I started playing this game. And so when I looked at this roster of 8 characters, this was one of the only characters that I had actually played in the original game. So I just decided to give them a shot, and I actually enjoyed the playstyle a lot.
At the moment, she kind of plays more of, well, sadly, more of a rat at the moment. How do you feel about her?
I think Jackie's design, when she's actually able to chase people down properly, is extremely difficult to play against when you're first learning the game. And so they have to tone down her chase potential very heavily. So at that point, when she's not actually winning the 1v1s that she tries to fight, it's going to force her into this very opportunistic, oh, I'm just going to find something that I'm guaranteed to win, and if I don't win, it doesn't really matter. And so it's probably going to be how Jackie plays down the line from now on. I don't really like it, but I've come to terms with it over time. I've also tried to reduce the W power so that when you're actually skirmishing, you also have to commit your ult. So it's other characters just like Kiara, Shouix, these kind of characters where if you're not fighting with your ult, you're just so much significantly weaker that you can tell there's a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very noticeable. I mean, we see a lot with Jackie players. There's a couple builds running around a ladder where no matter what you try to do, you can't ever secure a kill on somebody without committing your ultimate to it, which really does suck. And a lot of the damage does come down from the reactivation of the ult, but you have no control over that. It's a big issue with the character, I feel. Would you ever be against that becoming like a toggle? Maybe like on a global cooldown?
I think the toggle would honestly be very useful and show a lot more skill expression on Jackie, because right now her skill ceiling is noticeably lower than other characters. I feel like you'd have to tone down the damage on the ult spin for sure. Probably something like the longer it lasts, the more damage it would do. Because right now, the damage is allowed to be significant because you can't control it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big burst if you're able to get it, even throughout the game. It scales really well. Is there any changes you want to see for the character? Like, do you enjoy her current design, the way she's fitting in the metagame, or would you like to see some other changes to maybe raise that skill ceiling?
I think I've always wanted Jackie W to have some kind of Bloodhound effect, because right now, it's pretty much speed regardless of which direction you're running in. And if there is some kind of thing like, oh, it's a little bit lower when you're running away, but when you're actually going towards your target, you get faster. I feel like that would suit her playstyle dynamic a lot more and shift her towards the aggressive playstyle that she used to have.
So you kind of want what we have with Bernice's E at the moment, where if you're chasing somebody, you kind of get the movement speed bonus a little higher.
Something similar to that, yeah. I think it's okay for her to have movement speed while running away, but I think there should be some kind of benefit for actually trying to go towards people.
She's very simple, but one thing she does have that other characters don't is that she is, like I mentioned, she's been one of the characters been here for a long time, and over time she's been given a ton of weapons, now up to 4. So I kind of want to go through this. It might take a little while here, but she has 4 weapons for her now. She has dagger, two-handed, axe being unique to her, and a hidden weapon as dual swords. So I'm curious, what do you feel about these weapons? How do you like them? Do you think they fit in for kits? What's your thought process on them?
Right, so one of the reasons she actually has this many weapons in the first place is that these first 7 characters were kind of a base ground for what weapons are allowed to exist in the game. So if you're looking at Immortal Soul, you can kind of see that the weapons are split more between specifically how they hit people. It's like blade weapon, stab weapon, hand weapon. So Jackie ended up carrying pretty much all of the blade weapon. And so anything that could have possibly been blade was just immediately given to her. So these 4 weapon types pretty much come out of that.
So you're saying that she got all of the weapons just from an old design point because they were trying to mimic Immortal Soul?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so you think that like kind of dropped immediately after Jackie? They're just like, okay, we can't do this. There's no way we can possibly balance this.
Well, we can see it in the other characters too. Aya, she got stuck with gun. She has 3 weapons. Blunt for Magnus, 2 weapons. Fiora gets 3 stab weapons, and pretty much so on. That was pretty much the evolution of the game. And from there, pretty much every character that was released afterwards only had 1 weapon, always 1 weapon. Because these characters were just meant to flesh out the design.
That's really interesting bounce. I didn't know any of that. I came in way later into the game, so I didn't see what the development of the game looked like, or even what our favorite character here looks like. But I'm curious, in a competitive standpoint, how do you feel about the 4 weapons? Where do you think like they stand in terms of competitive viability? Like, which one's still best to you? Which one's the worst? And how would you go about taking them into a real game?
I think that the best weapons right now are going to be dual swords and dagger. Because I feel like these 2 weapons are the ones that are benefiting the most from Jackie's current game plan. Since she's not able to actually fight people properly, she falls into the category of characters that's just farming for their power. So, when you're farming animals, most of the time you're going to go for these more rare materials that are from wolves and bears. So you're looking for mithril, moonstone, force cores, pretty much anything of the sort. And most attack bearer characters fall into this sort of category. And when you're playing these weapons that can benefit from those drops, then you're in a much better state than, say, axes, which don't have a weapon that they can actually make with a random material. Oh, this is... Right.
Yeah,
so
you're just stuck on your base weapon, right? No matter what, with axe, you're stuck on your Santa Muerte the entire game, which is nice early game, and that's kind of the premise, but you don't have any formal plan for late game.
Right, pretty much. You're not able to scale into the late game as consistently as the other weapons just because you can't replace them.
Kind of like by where I'm more.
Yeah, so you're just hoping to farm up mastery, get those kills early on, and really try to accelerate that. Which also seems to be an issue with axe in general, as you don't really have access to a weapon skill.
The weapon skill is very clearly one of the worst weapon skills in the game by far. Right now, it'll probably give you an average of, say, 80 attack power when you activate it. But then you're getting 80 attack power for a 60-second cooldown, which is just
really long.
Yeah, it's just so below par for other weapon skills that you just notice you're significantly behind. It's good right when you hit level 7 weapon skill, right when you get it, it's fine, and then it's very quickly going to fall off.
Yeah, you kind of need to fight early game in that window, and then you just don't really do anything. I mean, if we make the comparison to even your other weapon skills, dagger, the cloak and dagger active is just super safe. You can run away from pretty much any engagement. Often called one of the best weapon, if not the best weapon skill in the game, just for how safe it is and the damage tied behind it. Then you also have, the two-handed parry, which while situational, can really swing some matchups on its head. And then you have, the dual sword rampage, which we all know is really nice with Jackie's skin in particular because of her W, the adrenaline. The adrenaline burst will heal her up a ton.
Right. When you're looking at the last weapon, which is two-handed sword, this weapon skill is actually very good as well. Probably similar in terms of safety to dagger skill, but it doesn't have the same kind of impact when you initially use it. It's also a little bit more difficult to use because you have to clearly understand what kind of character you're playing against to figure out what you actually want to parry while you're using it. And the early game mastery scaling is not as good, but when you're actually getting into the late game, it actually becomes a very strong weapon.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole purpose of two-handed. It's definitely always been the late game scaling weapon, and even the build you're showing is very greedy. It's the Mono Shiazu route with the Dragon Zobak. This is kind of a build that's been going on for a bit, but as we kind of have come accustomed to, Mono is a 4-zone weapon. It's really unsafe, but Jackie's kit kind of makes up for it. Do you like this route?
I have tried this route a few times. It's running on a route where the characters that are here are going to mostly be either Sisala or pistol characters. And these are characters in the early game that you are pretty much guaranteed to escape. Dial-In will be coming from Forest Beach Hotel, and you'll probably be able to escape her as well. And if you can just outpace them and get to beach faster, then you can just get out of their way before they actually start to become dangerous to you.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about the other weapons? What builds would you recommend running with the other weapons at the moment?
Besides this, my main plan is coming in with a dagger in pretty much all of my games, because any axe that is actually going to be relevant normally builds off of a chain scythe. Chain scythe doesn't actually require the hatchet that you would start with if you pick axe. So Sons of Muerte, Scythe, and Harp, all three of these are coming off of a chain scythe. So regardless of what weapon you're using, you're able to save this on any weapon.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So you're saying no matter what build you go, you're gonna start with dagger. So you pretty much have like limitless options in terms of where you go. You're able to go any weapon in the game.
Pretty much, yeah. Because most of the starting zones with knives, the ones that you'd want to be in, you can also just happen to pick up a rusty sword somewhere nearby. So you can always switch pretty much.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So pretty much no matter what, you could go dagger, start dagger, dagger go into two-handed, go into axe, go into dual sword. So pretty much you never have to lock in another weapon. There's also the other thing where like dagger does actually have a little bit of movement speed on it. While not super relevant, it is there.
Right, it does have this 0.05 movement speed, so even if you could do this on two-handed sword, which you kind of can, it is much more optimal to actually go on a kitchen knife and just take the movement speed and save yourself a few seconds.
That's really interesting. So let's talk about the build you have. So you showed the two-handed one earlier. This seems to be the dual sword route. This seems to be a very standard dual sword route. This is pretty old school, just really the addition of a Buccaneers to balloon these days.
Yeah, so the thing about the accessory is that no matter what you're doing, the build right now looks something similar to this. Dock Uptown has been a very core route for anyone that's going to be building some kind of carbonated water. If you're using carbonated water weapons, you're always going to be dock at some point, and you'll pretty much see that for Beach Dock, Uptown Dock. Hotel Dock doesn't really exist as much, because Uptown just has running shoes, which most routes are going to benefit from heavily the second they take them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a pretty cool explanation though. I actually did not know that. See the old school knowledge is coming through. Old man Shouix.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no, I'm getting old.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. You've been here too long. What about the other builds for, let's say, dagger and... Well, I believe you showed... Yeah, you showed two-handed earlier. So what about dagger and axe?
So dagger has a pretty similar plan. You might notice that Chapel Uptown is pretty common these days. Rotating around this bottom half of the map has been very common for attack fire builds. So this build essentially is trying to get out of the way, because if you're going into Factory Third, somewhere around Factory Dock, you are contesting these animals very heavily. There's always going to be players that are coming for the wolves that are in Factory, because there's two sets of wolves.
So your goal is to try and avoid all of the power spike in Factory, which is, like you mentioned, a very common power spike spot. You can see, God, we could be here for a while. We could Yuki, Razi, Loop. Pretty sure I'm missing something on the top of my head. Bernice is another one.
Bernice.
Yeah, very common build path. And it really just goes off like white rhinos. They tend to go Factory second just for that extra safety, but it's been turned into a very popular kill zone.
Yeah, and if anyone's going Factory, most of the time they're going left. They're never going up, because there's actually a mild overlap between Factory and Hospital that's stopping builds from actually going Factory to Hospital. So you have some kind of guaranteed safety, because they already have their bandage, they already have their scrap metal, they don't want to go here, they don't want to go up.
So you're trying to avoid those players as much as possible.
Yeah, the other thing that's very important is that on this route, and pretty much a lot of routes in general, you kind of want your third zone to have wolves to try and kill. If you can finish your first two zones before 2 minutes, and you can actually check the wolves before you start looting your third zone, or in the middle of looting your third zone, it can kind of shape your game plan towards where you're going to go next. Because say you're going Hospital third, oh, you farm both wolf camps. Oh, I hit like this meteorite. Then I can immediately shift my plan to play around the meteorite I just hit, or the mytho I just hit.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of things you can hit in general. Even if, like, if you miss some components, you could easily get an oilcloth, a moonstone, meteorites, mithril. I mean, as we know, like, you're not really trying to stay on these items. Like, the whole purpose of Jackie is you're really trying to scale into a late game with a bunch of transitional pieces, right?
Yeah, And I think that's just the core thing to understand about this game in general, is that the items that you can build initially are all pretty okay. But when you actually start looking at the items that are using these rare materials, you can just notice that they're significantly better.
Yeah, I mean, Mytho Armor right now, well, God, I mean, that's definitely an example, because Mytho Armor is definitely, like, the best chess piece in the game right now. Yeah, you can pretty much, it's best in slot on nearly everybody. It's just that strong. But yeah, what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's just any of these transitional pieces, generally you're able to slot it in pretty effectively without much of a hassle at all. Like, you're not too reliant on any one item. Very few builds are.
Right. And this last build, the Axe build, this is probably going to be less used just because Hospital can get fairly congested as a first zone. But if you find that Hospital and Beach are actually fairly open, this build is honestly not that bad. Most of the time you're going Hospital, Beach, and when I'm going for which teleport to go to, either Uptown or Hotel, I like to go on the upper route towards Hotel, pretty much jump into the Hotel water and just loot the boxes that are on the left side. Because if you actually look at Hotel, it will have the cloth that you need, the scrap metal that you might have missed in Hospital, the watch that you'll eventually need, and if you only got one piano wire in Beach, then you can try and recover it in Hotel.
Man, you're really going in depth with these the backups here. It's really nice. Gonna help out a lot of the new players trying to check out these builds for the first time, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people have avoided Axe completely. Not exactly a very popular weapon. I don't think I see it ever. It's just always like the very typical like B-Max 3-zone crit, super easy to pilot, you can turn off your brain, and you can just run into people. This one definitely requires a little more thought process into it.
I think axes are only a fast build when you're actually starting Cemetery, and you'll notice very quickly that this side of the map is not safe. Probably don't want to be near Cemetery as much if you're just learning how to loot in the game, because a lot of these stuff that you're going to want is going to get taken very quickly around this right side of the map.
Yeah, I mean, we joke about it a lot. If you don't go to Hospital first, you probably won't find anything on that side of the map ever. It's just super looted. People pass through it really fast. I'm curious though, with these builds, what do you recommend skilling on Jackie? Is there a general skill level order, or do you have something different from every type of weapon / playstyle?
Oh, okay, so Dual Swords is going to be the build that has something that is very straightforward. Every Jackie build starts with EWQ. How am I dragging this in? Oh, it's like this. I've never actually done this before.
Nearby.
Yeah, so EWQ is how every Jackie build is going to start, because in the first couple levels of the game, you are not going to fight people. It is not recommended to fight people. It's a complete waste of time. So you're just taking your mobility options first. From here, Jackie with dual swords is going to start maxing her W. And then it's a toss-up between whether you're going to max your passive next or your E. A lot of the time, I start putting points in E, because I want at least 3 points in E, because the base cooldown of E is actually pretty bad.
Yeah, it's super high, and that's kind of like where a lot of the I can't chase anybody's Jackie comes from. It's just you really need to have some cooldown reduction and like that E maxed out, which doesn't really happen until the mid game. It's pretty unfortunate. Yeah. So it looks like just EW, what's it called? We max our W, then our E, take our ultimate whenever, and then passive Q. So why aren't we bothering with our Q here? It has a lot of damage to it. It's the only ability in our kit with a ton of damage. Why is that being max last?
So Dual Swords Jackie is a very specific kind of build, because the quirk of Dual Swords is that all auto attacks are going to be happening twice. So this falls into Adrenaline Burst very well, because each auto is going to have pretty much 2 on-hit procs of W. So since we actually need the W a lot, that needs to be maxed. And then E becomes very important, because that base cooldown means once someone gets away from you once, that's pretty much it. So I'm going for 3 points in E, and then after level 2 ult, I'm just going straight for the passive. Because level 13, level 14 is actually going to be around the time where Wick spawns. Around 10 minutes, you should be level 13, level 14 around that time. So when you're skilling up with Jackie, it's actually very important to keep in mind when Wick is coming.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie's Wickline clear doesn't really matter what the build is. Her Wickline clear is very effective with the adrenaline burst up. Just heals you up in absolute time, especially with the Chainsaw Massacre. You pop both and you're just super safe. You'll never actually lose any HP.
Right, and I forget how to look at this normally. How can I show this properly? 1 second.
You're fine.
Because there is a way to show this. Hang on.
I too build meat.
Right. I only drag meat in here to pretty much show the animal chart. So you can see that Wick actually spawns around Research Center, always. She's going to come out of one of these 4 gates, some way or another. When you're setting up for Wick as Jackie, you can see that there is a boar that is right next to Research Center, and there's a boar to the right of it in Pond. One of these are pretty much always going to be up. So before you take Wick, before it spawns, you can just try and kill a boar for your power spike with your passive that you had just leveled with Wicking.
Right, so that just gives you an extra really big bonus for your attack power.
Yeah. So that just makes the clear that much faster in a pretty contested objective, so it actually ends up mattering.
So with those builds, what about the other ones? What about this skill loading for anything else? Does it change for dagger, axe, two-hand, or are we pretty much roughly the same?
I think with two hands, you can do something fairly similar, but... Okay, for dagger, I do something weird. You're gonna have to bear with me here.
That's fine, I'm excited.
Okay, so EWQ is a normal start. Like I said before, you're always gonna be starting like this. It doesn't get weird yet. So
I've heard about this. For the animal farming, right?
Yeah, 3 points of Q for the animal farming, because when you're hitting hospital, you probably should be around level 4, level 5. So this just speeds up your wolf clear, right, which is actually very important to save time. From here, you're still going to be in your third zone around level 7, so I just continue taking points in Q. And then, okay. So, at this point I have 4 points in Q, 4 points in E, and a point in W. Then second point in Alt, 2 points in W. Then max Q. Is it W? This doesn't really matter as much. So this was E, and this is passive, and then this is W.
Okay, so you gotta talk to me here. What's going on? Why are we holding on our 5th point of Q and E to level 14 and 15, and we're only putting 3 points in W? What's going on there?
Okay, so the thing about W is that they have actually significantly nerfed it over time. Maxing W doesn't actually increase the duration of it anymore, and the movement speed increase is okay. It's not as good. The main reason you want points in W is for the on hit, which is getting improved when you're putting points in W. Putting points in Q for the animal farm is very nice because they shifted a little bit of Jackie's power into her Q in general. So when you Q someone, they actually do kind of want to back off, so you can just maintain your zone if you don't want to fight them. These points in E are still very relevant because, again, the base cooldown is pretty bad. Once you get enough points in E to feel secure, you can start doing things that are probably more unsafe that other characters can't do, but Jackie now can. And again, we are concerned about Wick. Wick is very important with this character. You want to try and contest Wick or take Wick if possible. So before you start fighting Wick at about level 13, level 14, you want these 2 points in W for the healing.
Okay. And that's a lot of big brain. Sounds like you've done a lot of labbing with this character over time.
I have a lot of games on Jackie. I spent a significant amount of time actually trying to figure out what the skill order I want is. And most of this looks weird if you try and put it out in theory, but in practicality, this is pretty much how I want to play points almost all the time.
Okay. I mean, I can't really argue, man. Every time I try to argue, I feel like you have like this whole essay written out as to why it's correct. So I've learned my lesson. I've learned my lesson not to critique here.
This is also what I do for Axe, because Axe is a build that cares actually even more about Q than the other builds. It pretty much always has, because of the massive attack fire stat that is going to be on every axe.
Okay, so that's just pretty much the skill ordering then. So we got the really funky skill ordering that comes down from from the axe and dagger, and then with Dioscur we just have the WE max, and I'm assuming the same thing falls for two-handed.
Yeah, two-handed's pretty much the same. It cares about attack speed a significant amount.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Man, I would say let's play a game, but we're 30 minutes into this already. I don't even know if it's worth it at this point. I feel like you just kind of dropped a knowledge bomb of information about like everything that is Jackie. Do you feel like there's anything you want to add?
Okay, so the main thing about Jackie is you are going to have one wolf camp to yourself. The biggest thing you can do is once you have this wolf camp to yourself, you want to try and maintain control of that camp as much as you possibly can. In the top right of your game, there will always be a timer that's shown how long the game has lasted. It's important to check the timer when you kill wolves. You can do anything to keep the timer, like you can just put in chat, you can just put a dot. You can type anything, because that's going to be the one zone you really want to keep. And then the wolves will respawn in 4 minutes. You want to kill them again. One of the big things about animal camps in this game is you don't actually care that much about killing them the first time, you care about killing them the second time. Because the second time is going to give you a large chunk of mastery that will pretty much keep you in the game even if you started to fall behind.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, there's a strategy that we hear a lot in higher level plays, which is like controlling a couple zones, keeping timers. I'm sure it's something that a lot of people watching this have probably seen in probably some streamers, where it's like, yo, you go to a hotel, right? Something very common. Nadine goes to a hotel, they kill the wolf camps, and they'll write down the timers, and you'll see them in between a couple zones pretty much the entire game, just because they're really trying to keep control of those zones, push anybody out, and keep those camps to themselves. And you're just following a very similar mindset to that. You really want to try and get the XP lead from those animals, because you, like I mentioned earlier, you don't really have a guaranteed way of securing kills. Like, Jackie has a really hard time securing kills unless it's a very favorable matchup for you. Like, they don't really have a way of getting away from you. So you really want to just try and farm as much as possible to transition to the point where nobody can really run from you. A lot of those mithril gears have a lot of bonus moon speed stats on it. If we were on dagger, something like a fragger rock also has a ton of moon speed on it. So like, we just have a lot of opportunity to transition and get a lot of those power spikes in our build to a point where Jackie doesn't feel more of a, you can't, like, just feels like what she should be, like a scrapper. She can go in now, she can take those fights and take those long extended trades if need be.
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much what her items are trying to do, is trying to restore her to a state where she can actually chase. Most of the items that she tries to pick up are going to represent that in some way.
It's really interesting. For such a simple character, I think you're just going on here for over 30 minutes. Kind of crazy. A lot more depth to this character than you would say. What do you think?
I think that when you have a character that has a lower skill ceiling when it comes to micro, where there's not much skill expression that you can show while you're piloting the character itself, that's what gives you the room to focus on your macro, your game knowledge. Because I've played this game for so long, I've had a lot of time to pretty much train my game knowledge. And once I find something, I can immediately capitalize on the good luck that I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of being one of the best players in the game. I mean, I don't think we're gonna show a game today because I don't really see a need to. I think you guys, Shouix explained everything beautifully, and really, if you guys are interested in seeing a match with him with some of these weapons, I don't know, Shouix, would you ever be down for that? Would you ever be down to come back for show, give some explanations on maybe like in the future ranked season, show exactly what you're running, show how you're taking over the ladder with Jackie?
Oh yeah, sure, pretty much. I'm going to be free the majority of the time, so if you ever want to have gameplay of me playing Jackie, I can go ahead and show that.
I mean, it's definitely a lot better than you than me, that's for sure. I've seen the difference. I think everyone sees the difference. I think everybody knows by now. It's just, even though you're kind of you're a relatively low-key player, you're not super active in like much of the community discourse, you kind of just keep to yourself. I think anybody that's good at this game knows who you are by now. They know your name, and then every time you pop up, they're like, ah, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that makes sense why I died there. We know who Shouix is. Alright, man. Yo. Thank you so much for being here with me today, man. Thank you so much for dropping a wealth of knowledge. I really thought we were gonna get some gameplay here, but I just don't really see a purpose, man. You went so in-depth about everything. I think the people are really gonna like this. There's gonna be a lot of a lot of good information, and I would love to have you back for potential gameplay in the future if you're down for that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to talk about it and show up here, and I'm definitely interested in trying this again.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yo, appreciate you so much for being here, man. Thank you so much. I hope you have a nice rest of your night, man.
Yeah, take care, you too.
Take care, man.